All right, so we're looking at doing a quotient rule here. This is in section 2f. This is the derivative of the exponential function. So we're looking here, I've sort of already marked this up because we can either do this function as a quotient rule or as a product rule. So let's just do the quotient rule first. So let me zoom in a touch. So in this space here, we've got u equals e to the x plus 2, which means u dash equals e to the x. And then we've got v equals e to the negative x plus 1, which equals v dash equals negative e to the negative x. So we're all sweet here. So let's put our values in here. So we've got u dash equals e to the x, and then we've got v equals, I'm just going to do it out like this. So e to the negative x, I'm just going to skip a step of working here. This v term could be written as 1 over e to the x. So I'm just going to do that for the minute. So 1 over e to the x. All right, and then that's plus 1. And then we've got minus u. Our u term is e to the x plus 2. Oh, and then we've got times by v dash, which is negative 1 over e to the x. So don't get confused. I've turned this, rather than have the negative power, I've put it on as a denominator, and I'm missing my v squared at the bottom, which is going to be v is e. Let's actually just gonna write it as 1 over e to the x plus 1, and that's squared there. So then we can go to our next term, which is going to be, I'm just going to expand this through. So we've got e to the x over e to the x, and then we've got plus e to the x. And then our next term here, we've got minus. Now I'm just going to multiply these things together. So I'm looking up here. I'm going to actually multiply this negative and this negative 1, because that'll give me a plus, so I can get rid of this. And then this next term, e to the x times e to the x, 1 over e to the x gives me e to the x over e to the x. And then I've got here 2 times this thing here is positive 2 over e to the x. All right, now this is still all over our squared term here. So let's just copy that. Paste that down here. All right, so I haven't done anything with that. Now, our next term here, we've got 1 plus e to the x. So e to the x over e to the x is 1. E to the x, here we've got 1. So we've got plus 1. And then we've got plus 2 over e to the x. All right, and then this whole thing is over 1 e to the x plus 1 squared. Let's just clean this up a little bit. I've got 2. Now, if I multiply this by e to the x over e to the x, actually no, I'm just going to leave it for a minute. So I'm going to just write this 2 plus e to the x plus 2 e to the negative x over 1 e to the x plus 1. Just wondering whether I can expand this out. Squared. I'm just going to see. I'm just checking what the calculator, what it wants it, the form it wants it in. 2f. Okay, so they've written it. Oh no, I've got it in the form they have their final answer in. So that's fine for the quotient rule there. Sorry, it was a bit slow, and at the end I was stalling a little bit. I was trying to, in my mind, I was seeing these 2's here. I was considering if we pulled out the common factor of 2, whether that would help. Now, let's go up to the product rule, because this is actually usually the simpler way to do these things. So we've got this to the negative 1. So if we do it as a product rule, we've got u equals e to the x plus 2, and then v equals e to the negative x plus 1 to the power of negative 1. So then u dash equals e to the x, v dash equals negative e to the negative x plus 1 bracket negative e to the x, sorry, negative e to the negative x, and that's our derivative there. So then if we apply this to the product rule, we get our u dash is e to the x, and then v equals e to the x, negative x plus 1, and then plus u is e to the x plus 2. All right, and then v dash is this thing here. So I'm gonna combine these negative signs to give me a positive. So this is going to be times e to the negative x, which is this term here, and then bracket e to the negative x plus 1. Oh, and I missed a negative 2 there. I should have had negative 2. All right, so then let's clean this up. This here is e to the x over e to the negative x plus 1. So that's this term here. The power there takes it that way. And then plus, we've got here e to... actually, no. That's e to the negative x, so that goes on the bottom. So on the top here, we're just going to have this term. This is the only thing without a negative power. So we're going to have e to the x plus 2. And then on the bottom here, we've got e to the x bracket e to the negative x plus 1 squared. All right, so if we... Just wondering whether I've missed something here. The derivative, yeah. All right, so our next step here, we're going to multiply. I'm just going to change color. We will multiply this by, I'm just going to get rid of the equal sign. We're going to multiply. We've got to make these denominators common. So I'm going to multiply by an e to the x over an e to the x. And this will, and I'll also multiply by 1 e to the negative x plus 1 squared, e to the negative x plus 1 squared. So now we're going to go back to here. We've got e to the 2x, because we've got 2 of them, and e to the negative x plus 1 squared all over. Let's just keep going. We've got e to the x, that wasn't meant to be squared. Sorry, that's my bad. That's meant to be just to the power of 1. E to the negative x plus 1 squared. Now we've got, so this multiplied with this gives us, just continuing on there, I got a bit distracted because this term here was confusing me, but it actually makes sense when we go through here. So I've expanded this out, I've multiplied this out, so e to the 2x times e to the negative x gives us this term here, so I can cross out the squared and the e to the x plus e to the 2x plus e to the x plus 2 all over. We've still got the same denominator, and we get e to the x plus 2e to the x plus e to the x plus 2, I'm saying e to the x a lot, e to the x bracket e to the negative x plus 1 squared. Now, final term, this is going to help us. Now, because of what we've got here, we've put these two terms together. Then we've got 2x and this e to the x. That shouldn't actually be there. So let's move that 2 in. All right, now, I've got e to the negative x plus 1 squared. Now, I'm just going to, as I've said, this term here, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to times the top by, I'll do it in the line above actually, it'll make more it might help. So I'm going to times this by this whole thing. So you've got to times the top and the bottom by this. 1 over e to the x over 1 over e to the x. So I'm technically multiplying by 1 because it's the same top and bottom. This will cancel with this. And then here, on this term here, you'll notice that every one of these terms on top are multiplied by 1 over e to the x. So we'll see a little bit of cancelling here. So I'll write the next line of working out just purely because it's a little bit confusing. So 2e to the x. Now, because I'm multiplying by 1 over e to the x, the denominator becomes e to the x plus e 2x over e to the x plus 2 over e to the x all over e to the negative x plus 1 squared. These cancel, so I'm just left with the x there, so the 2 goes, and then that final term is there. So I end up with 2 plus e to the x plus 2e to the negative x all over e to the negative x plus 1 squared. Now, this one here is one of the few times, a lot of the time the quotient rule, the product rule actually becomes easier to solve. This one here actually was harder to simplify down. The quotient itself actually simplify down a little bit easier. So when you look at these, it's actually probably easier to use that quotient rule than the product rule.